Symbolic History Through Sight and Sound. 26. Mozart, Age of Critique and Imperative. Mozart wrote the C Major Concerto in 1785, 6 years before his death as a pauper, near the age of 36. Can art add to the prodigy of the music, especially an art as limited as that of the Salzburg portrait? Yet against the pomps of 1700, even this bespeaks an enlightened sensibility, hung between assertive claims of Baroque and Revolution. From that valley, where reason in Voltaire mocks itself, yielding after mid-century to Rousseau's cult of heart, what fine-spun enigmas of confidence and disillusion rise through Werther's natural rapture and suicidal pain, our only happiness, our spring of sorrow. Two years later, Mozart, shifting to the string quintet and the key of G minor, risked an ultimate poignance. While Goya, born before Mozart and to live a generation beyond him, in his portrait of Jovellanos, endangered Spanish liberal, robes in high style a melancholy lyrical as Burns. The wan moon is setting behind the white wave, and time is setting with me, oh. Like Cooper's stricken deer that left the herd, I sum up half mankind and add 2/3 of the remaining half, and find the total of their hopes and fears, dreams, empty dreams. We plumb a private recess where Rembrandt's irradiated space has shrunk to a corral of 12 bedlamites, too sharply felt ever to be forgotten. And it is not merely private. Goya releases the unconscious of neo-Gothic Europe, visions of terror. Visions of longing. Blake, born a year after Mozart, though he would just outlive Beethoven, was already stretching obscurity and neglect with imperative symbols. Here, the virgin that pines for man conceives under the drooping phallic trunk a winged kiss in the vale of Lowther, as when a dream of Thirolatha flies the night. Through the academic skill of Canova, that ferment turns the Cupidan psyche, begun the year of Mozart's quintet, to another dream of Thirolatha. What staggers us in this fin de siècle is the complexity with which Ancien Régime opens its Baroque and Rococo heritage of sophisticated resource to enlightenment, storm and stress, romantic and Faustian desire, to wing mountain caves by moonlight, bathe body in fountains of dawn. In that Sehnsucht Kantian soul finds itself alien to the Cartesian and Lockean earth it had thought to master. Meine Ruhe ist hin, mein Herz ist schwer, ich finde sie nimmer und nimmermehr. The phenomenal melts toward the 1800s transparency of this Caspar David Friedrich. But the longing beyond earth has threaded Christendom throughout. Let our search for a Mozartian match test a sequence of elegiac refinements. From the 1220 height of Gothic down, how could the blindfolded and spear-broken synagogue of Strasbourg but distill love banishment, yet in pure thinness those lines before Renaissance or Baroque were thinkable, exclude Mozart's mood, suggest their own supersensual sliding through dissonances of second and third to the unsullied vacancy of fifth and octave. And on the green underpaint of the 14th century, the rose-tinted saints of Simone and the Lorenzetti, this flower-bearing Anne, require in haloed estrangement some music of mood suspension. Machaut's Ars Nova, haunted by ambiguities of double leading tone. By the late 15th century, Botticelli blends into Florentine Renaissance the last Gothic strain, eternizing what Pater would call the ineffable sadness of exiles, this Tamar soul shut out. Such coats young Tamar and fair Rachel's child put off when he was sold and she defiled. But if temperament curiously affines the clean-cut melancholy of Botticelli to the wistful perfection of the Mozart Adagio, it is over a gap as vast as from the chansons of Poliziano, Isaac, this Bus Noir. As Renaissance fills out its energized forms, tragic power sweeps us from the melting of G minor. Even the expressive break of El Greco asks such transpersonal chromatics as spread from Italy to all Europe. Thus the 1600 France of the old Claude Lejeune. While the Baroque at its most tranquil, these Poussin shepherds deciphering a tomb inscription, I too in Arcadia, moves to the formulated chords of the century of Descartes. A grandiloquence Mozart and his time have outgrown. Only with the Watteau turn to the 18th century does the plaintive introspection of Rococo, under the facade of grand style, approach the horizon of Mozart, while music too, in Couperin and Rameau, hints at a like possibility. But in miniatures, Goya and Mozart would liberate and magnify. Though it is not a question of physical size or even of the preeminence of the artist, but that 1790, as in this firstly portrait of a girl, is a post-Rococo and pre-Romantic hatching ground, where modernity, with its transfiguring reach and risk, is already a star. As Beethoven was told when he went to Vienna, receive the spirit of Mozart from the hands of Haydn. Yet what he received ripened toward another future. The pre-Raphaelite revival under the myth of Dante, of soul's timeless hunger. This blessed Beatrice by Rossetti has slipped from Mozart in the other direction. Too lush of romantic touch, searching the sensual for a mystic clue, Isolde's dying swoon. And as that voluptuous transcendence of earth mounts through Picasso's blue and rose toward the ecstatic break of Cubism, Stravinsky's Firebird speaks how far music is shedding the tonal canons in which Mozart had robed expressive pain. What the resonances reveal over all diversity, all anachronistic likeness. Is the power of the time strand, the 1786 fitness of Goya, where the courtly dress and ironic play of France, this park of cloudy trees out of Fragonard, trembles toward that future. Toward Friedrich's dissolution of outwardness, when late Beethoven and Schubert would confirm the soul search Mozart had deepened even into the last movement of the G minor quintet. How far Berkeley, early in the century, had taken the turn to subjective nature, one might not have known until Coleridge's use of him in 1796. All organic harps, diversely framed, that tremble into thought, as o'er them sweeps, plastic and vast, one intellectual breeze, at once the soul of each and God of all. In the reduction of the picture to sure plane and line, Friedrich explores an affinity the modern has felt with the Orient, with that calligraphy of mood soul the Chinese by 1200 had shrined in the thought and poetry of ink on silk. Yet what could Liang Kai have revealed to Friedrich but what Kant had mediated, the shift from outer to inner, while the representation of the outward is quietly maintained. Whatever 1820 Friedrich might have treasured in the Chinese is far from that picturesque fable of royal pomp 1740 Boucher had found there. Though Mozart had embraced those poles, the Turkish seraglio with piccolo, trumpets, triangle, and cymbals from 5 years before the quintet in G minor. We pick up what we are attuned to. Western cultivation of world art can only clothe in foreign tongues what is nascent and native. The ceiling of Roger II's Palatine Chapel in Palermo was surely executed by Muslims from Fatimid Africa, but its Byzantine ritual of gold in dark speaks the 12th century Romanesque, which hosted those kindred jewelings. By the end of the 15th century, Gentile Bellini's sketch of a Turkish artist, however aware of the Persian parchment miniature, favors the cleanness of foreshortening, space, and gathered robe, which the early Renaissance was focused on. And what the Western Baroque and Rococo found in the palatial East after 1600 was the splendor their own courts were ripe to rival. Yet the luxury of inlay decoration, whether from Chinese porcelains or Mughal India, was caught up in the dynamism of 18th century Europe. In Capodimonte, Naples, the feather curlicues and Chinese figurines mount another body of fate, whose radiative conquest coincides with its art absorption, no less of the West than the tonal tensions of the music Mozart was heir to, pergolesi. Yet even in that energy, Baroque grandeur yields to precious line, bulk thins like the 1710 universe of Berkeley. For things, their esse is percipe, nor is it possible they should have any existence out of the minds or thinking things which perceive them. A break from the heroic past, from the 1700 halls of Chatsworth, the music of Charpentier. These forms swell with Cartesian substance, with the certainty which crowns Locke's primary and secondary analysis of reason's limitation. Wherever we perceive the agreement or disagreement of any of our ideas, there is certain knowledge. And wherever we are sure those ideas agree with the reality of things, there is certain real knowledge, of which agreement of our ideas with the reality of things, having here given the marks, I think I have shown wherein it is that certainty, real certainty, consists. How far from the tone of solid Locke is Voltaire's skeptic praise of him in The Ignorant Philosopher. Locke confirms me in the opinion that there are no innate ideas, that it is absurd to say the will is free, that I cannot know any substance, as I can have no ideas but of their qualities, that the words matter and spirit are mere words. The first thinning, the diversion of incipient ennui in elegant play, with its fondness for motifs from Renaissance, Pompeii, and China, appears in those arabesques Watteau painted about 1708 in the studio of Audran, to be imitated by a generation of followers. The link to Couperin and Rameau, this dance from Rameau's Gallant Indies, is patent, and it was during the same years that Berkeley, as in the passage just quoted, let reason deprive itself at once of its chief field and power, of physical reality and of intellectual abstraction. Since the Crusades, the West had been too intently fixed on its own Eurekain action, vision, and art to experience the sophisticated restlessness with which the 18th century, called, as with the consciousness of Vico, Augustine by the English, now scours the globe for fashionable novelties. From Boucher's France to Chippendale's England, from the porcelain factories of Dresden to the Sicilian Chinese palace at the end of the century, the janissaries of Sultan Seoul, Candide and the rest, press the world to search for pleasure. But as with the Abyssinian inhabitants of Johnson's Happy Valley, gratified with whatever the senses can enjoy, the romantic disquiet of Rasselas distills exactly from those gardens of fragrance, those fortresses of security. Though that Europe of chinoiserie, of Johnson's Abyssinia and Mozart's Seraglio was still Europe, as far removed as Don Juan or Childe Harold from the ceremonial repose of the East it ransacked, the Ming tombs and Hall of Sacrifice near Peking. Thus, with a wilder frenzy, Pound, late symbolist offshoot of that Byronic need, seizes on every chateau vestige of mythic health, from Homer to the Italy of Dante, or the dynasties of Han, Sung, Tang. In England as in Germany, the stance of reasoned grandeur persists, but undercut, as with Swift, Pope, Berkeley, Hume. Handel clothes German Baroque in European Enlightenment. The sophistications of Couperin and Scarlatti prank the amplitudes of his concerti grossi.